They just amazed us. Of course, many of them, live under difficult circumstances. If I tell you that the cost of living is similar to many things that we would pay here in the United States, let's say food, lodging, and so on, some of them earn only $600 a month. So how do they survive? That's another story. And that makes plenty of room for testimonies in their meetings, okay? So to think of places of privilege and so on. And yes, some of them did whisper into our ears, can Advent Health open a hospital here? That would help. Let's show you, here is the building. The Koreans just opened a brand new hospital. We think Advent Health can do better. And surprise of all surprises, they knew more, Dr. Gosen, about Advent Health than many other Adventist centers around that we have been to. These people knew. They have a lot of interest in health. Some are professionals. Unfortunately, many of them work for the minimum wage and so on. But the purpose of all of this, the reason why my wife and I decided that I should say a few words about this is the energy that is there. Your youth pastor just greeted me. We were together in Greece for the whole summer. He was taking Greek, biblical Greek. I was teaching Hebrew at that time. And he remembered, he came, we just chatted here for a moment. And I remember the International Church in Greece, okay? African man who married Philippine ladies, and the children wonder, where did we come from? And where do we belong? I was just proud of our ACA students from La Sierra, from Walla Walla and other places, how they embraced those young people, took them out to eat pizza together, basketball they played. I could go on forever. That's a sign of getting old. So I will stop here. Yeah, so another of those life-changing experiences. So maybe it's time that we go to our topic today. So here it is. A mere breath. It's all just and that's it. But I hope we'll be encouraged when we leave this place. That while we can still, and we can do something and make this world a better place while we are still around, right? Let's begin with Count. Did you know that he was a Count, Leo Tolstoy? Okay, so when we talk about like a little of the Western world, you have, when you say Shakespeare, right? And then you step a little toward the East, and it's Tolstoy, right? So he was one of the greatest writers of all times. That's why, as soon as you saw the picture, saw the name, and so on, I'm sure that you remember a number of things. Best known, he wrote a lot, but best known by the first two, War and Peace and Anna Karenina, okay? He became well known, not only Russia, in his country of Russia, but also around the world. Great accomplishment, people admired him, they devoured his books, they loved it. There was a problem. He had lived for half a century now. He was aged 51. And the problem was that he really completely immersed himself into what he was doing. And a visible external sign of it was the Bible always on Tolstoy's desk. He believed in the principles of the Bible. So he has had enough money, enough popularity or glory, and now he's 51, and he kind of turned a little away from what he had been doing. Reminds me of Albert Schweitzer, who said, So many years of my time I have spent in speaking words. Now it's time to begin speaking through actions. That's how Schweitzer left for Africa and dedicated the rest of his life working with lepers. And Tolstoy, what would he do now? He began thinking hard about this timeless question: does life have a meaning? If you have at least watched the movie Anna Karenina, you can understand what we are talking about, or follow the conversations in War and Peace and so on. So he himself now said, okay, I have written this now for the whole world, see how complex life can be and how complex human mind can be. What about myself? And in this second part of his life, he did not write as much, but it was more like a self-examination. And he wrote the least known of his books, and the shortest, by the way. You will trust me now when I show you. And it's called Confession. Now in English, you would expect, that this would be confessions, but no, it is a confession. Anybody who wants to touch the book, we'll pass it around and just look at it. It's short, but it's profound. I learned how it's profound because I joined the Advent Health University, and it was the beginning of my career, so classes were not overwhelmingly big, but the students were very serious. I gave them a choice of reading Tolstoy or how to handle a conflict, and I said, depending on your interest and need, and so on. When we met next time, I said, which of the two books did you choose? Everybody was interested in Tolstoy. Hey, the man even tried to take his life, and you enjoyed it. No, we did not enjoy reading it. We liked it because that's what life is, they said. And then I scratched my head and I said, oh yeah, they are already, what do we call it, like, not senior students, but junior, senior students, third, fourth year. Now they are starting to think about life seriously. So Confession is the work that was so radical, there was no publisher in Russia who would work on this book. So what did he do? What did Tolstoy do? He published it in a marvelous city of freedom, that's Geneva. Okay? And he will be followed by Mr. Lenin, who spent, during turbulent years in Russia, his favorite time in life was when he lived in Geneva. It's a good place, I can tell you, because we were privileged to live there for about 4 years. So the book was published in Geneva. Why? Here is something from the introduction that tells you right away why the state church, the Russian Orthodox Church, is the state church, or was the state church, and would not tolerate someone to write this and publish. Wherever the teachings of doctrine exist, when I read the word doctrine, I begin to shake. Because that's something that people love to pour a lot of cement and keep it that way forever. So that not a little tiny thing can be changed. It has to be a doctrine, which simply is a Latin word for teaching. But wherever the teachings of doctrine exist, formally and coldly told, formal way and personalist, devoid of personality of human nature, supported by force. Okay? So do not get into conflict with a religious leader because he's a state official, that type of thinking. You cannot oppose the ones who proclaim the doctrine because they are state officials. You don't want to go to jail because you argued with a priest or something like that. Those teachings are not part of the life of the people. That would have enraged the leaders of the church and the relations among them. So doctrines can become so dry and cold that they do not impact at all on the spiritual life of the people, and yet people in their field are trying by every ounce of their energy to maintain it that way. But to understand Tolstoy, we need, and Tolstoy crisis in life, midlife crisis, we need to go to someone else who was not so much troubled in life, but there was one trouble for him. His name was Alphonse de Lamartine. I loved reading this man because Lamartine was a representative, one of the best poets of Romanticism. And now I'm becoming personal. I'm telling you a little about myself. I love to be romantic. Dark chocolate with a little mint flavor, full moon. What more do you need? And so on. So Tolstoy admired Lamartine. Do you know why? Well, we said both men revere the Bible. That is true. Lamartine loved the Bible. By the way, yes, here, this man, Lamartine, he was the finalist with Napoleon to become the president of France. Guess who won? So both men revere the Bible. Let's go now to the next one. Here is a great romantic poet and French statesman, very much involved in politics, and yet at the same time, he was a very good poet at the same time. So the best known poem by Lamartine, okay? I love this one because that's Lamartine in a nutshell. Lamartine, he dreams that he's sitting next to a beautiful person, a lady, by a lake. And the title of the poem is The Lac. And there is a problem. They are having such a good time. That's the problem. Why is that the problem? They knew that this too shall pass. How many years did that happen? I don't see many expressions on your face. How long ago since the time you were sitting next to somebody and, on the public bus and said, Lord, I hope there'll be only one seat so she can sit on my lap. We can afford only one cone of ice cream. We'll lick both of us the same cone. Okay. Not everybody is romantic in this room. So the two of them are enjoying themselves, full of love, and they look at the lake. And there is a problem now. This lake, how can we stay here forever? It's so good. We just need eternity. Okay? So like time, the lake is eternal, yet fleeting. Soon there'll be a storm, and lake will not be as attractive as it is now. So the poet begins talking to the lake, Lamartine. He converses with the lake. But the lady sitting next to him, I suggest that she was a little smarter than him. That happens very often, so I see that your agreement. He said, it's not just the lake, the time. So here is the famous line, how my wife and I loved when we were in Lebanon, see a national park. And because Lamartine's favorite country in the Middle East was Lebanon, these words that are there in between the quotation marks are engraved on the rock. Okay? Tragically, Lamartine and his wife lost their child while they were in the Middle East. I think that the child died when they were in Lebanon. But they love the place. All time, suspend your flight. If you are into literature, you would know this line. Okay? So Lamartine is saying, all time, can you slow down with your flight? Allow us to enjoy to the fullest what today is offering to us. And then he continues, and by the way, he is quoting her. She's actually saying that Aren't there enough of miserable people suffering in this world? And they are praying that their time will pass quickly. Leave us alone. We are happy. We don't want you to pass so quickly. So some of these lines impress Tolstoy. And I believe that we can understand Tolstoy much better when we go back to Lamartine. Both men loved the Bible and struggled with something that one of the books of the Bible deals with. Ecclesiastes, the Hebrew word is Kohelet. The book is also known as the book of the preacher. My favorite is the book of the teacher, and so on. It's a troublesome book in the Bible. How many times have you read the Song of Songs and wondered, whoever approved his book to be in the Bible? So let's try to allegorize this. The male lover is God, and these are his people. And then you come to some passages, oh no, God couldn't possibly do this when loving his people and so on. So you need to come back to the literal meaning. And how can such a thing be in the Bible and so on? So inclusion of Ecclesiastes was debated for a long time, but it made it into the Bible. On the other hand, a brilliant US novelist, this is what he said, the greatest single piece of writing I have ever known. There are people who love the book of Ecclesiastes, and one, a good friend of ours and probably of many of you, Don Williams. You remember him? In charge of one of the Sabbath school classes here, former academic dean in the school where we are privileged to teach. So he says, it's my favorite book in the Bible because this is the most honest book in the Bible. And every time when I was teaching wisdom books of the Bible, I would invite Dr. Williams, and he would never get tired of talking about the book of Ecclesiastes. He loves that book. And the book is one of the 5 scrolls among the writings. The Old Testament in Hebrew is divided into the books of Moses, known as the Torah, or the Pentateuch, we call it. Then we have the prophets, 4 major and 12 minor. Here we are. And then the third division are the writings. And within the writings, there is one section, okay, 5 scrolls. And these scrolls are read at the 5 major festivals in Israel. So during the Feast of Tabernacles, when it's Sukkot in Jerusalem or somewhere else, even here in Orlando, if you go to the synagogue for the Sukkot, then you will see a small, what do we call, huts, shelters, booths, built where people live and remember their ancestors who temporarily lived in the wilderness, isn't it? And that is a good time to ask, what is life all about? Have you ever done that? My wife and I live and we travel, and sometimes it takes a few weeks, and we can manage it with 2 bags only. And we come back home and say, why do we need an apartment? We survive with 2 bags. That's all. Well, why the rest? What do you do with it? So this is one of the books associated with King Solomon. So every time we said the Psalms, we think of David, isn't it? Even though only 73 Psalms are associated with David out of 150, about half. So some of the books, especially wisdom books of the Bible, are associated with Solomon. And this is how the learned people, the rabbis, explained it. When a man is young, think of young Solomon. He sings songs. Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. The best song is about what? About love, right? And a good time to experience it is when you are young. So when a man is young, he sings songs. When he's fully grown, he speaks words of wisdom. Okay? Let's think of parents. This is the way to do it. This is not the way to do it. And isn't it? But I know that many of us are now grandfatherly. Let's come to the third stage. when he gets old, he tells stories. Okay, so Song of Songs, the book of Proverbs, isn't it? And then when he gets old, he tells stories. That is Ecclesiastes. So that's how Jewish tradition associated this book with King Solomon. So Ecclesiastes is definitely different from book called Proverbs, the book of Proverbs. You remember, I believe that you were sitting last time on this side, and we talked about college and university students. When they come to school, the first year or two, they are Proverbs people. Hopefully, they know what they want to do. And when they graduate, they know what they will work and they have planned it out and so on. That's the perspective of the optimist. That is the book of Deuteronomy, the heart of the Old Testament, right? Do good, you will prosper, isn't it? Do what is not good, you will suffer. Do good, you will live. So, optimist, a clear portrayal of the path to success. I know what are the answers that the professor wants me to write down or type out or circle and so on. Almost everything is cut and dry with very few surprises. Okay? But then, as we continue with our life, we see it's not black and white. It's not that simple. So the pessimist, after reading books like the book of Job, the book of Ecclesiastes, the uncertainties of life and the certainty of death. There is one certainty in life, and that is death, which is the antidote. Consistency and just reward are undermined. Okay? So it's very unsettling, isn't it? Let's look at the beginning of the book. This is very important. You remember we talked about Semitic languages, and you begin with a conclusion or the summary. Okay? Across the Semitic world, whether we're talking about Jewish faith or Islam or Christianity, Matthew 1:1, Jesus is who? In Matthew 1:1. Okay? He's the Messiah, son of David, isn't it? In Islam, in the name of God, all compassionate, all merciful. Bismillah ya Rahman Rahim. And here are the first two verses that basically tell you everything. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. This is from the NIV. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. All right, so three observations here. One, the book begins with a concluding statement. This is how it begins, that's how it's going to end. Okay, so from the beginning, you know what it's about. Two, okay, meaningless, meaningless. In Hebrew, when the two statements, when a statement is made with these two words next to each other, that's the superlative. And that's why the translation here is utterly meaningless. Just we have mentioned moments ago, Shir HaShirim, which is Song of Songs, that is superlative, the best of all songs. Let's come to the third one. This one is of interest here. The entire book of Ecclesiastes hangs on the proper understanding of one word. And what is that word? Hevel. That's correct. Hevel, yes. Hevel. Don't be afraid to pronounce it. Hevel. Hevel. What is the meaning of Hevel? The problem is, if you are using translations of the Bible, then you find vanity. And the problem with vanity is that word was somewhat understood some time ago. When do we use the word vanity today? Is it for makeup also? No. Or jewelry? Nobody ever heard of the more redundant during camp meeting when he was asked about makeup, is that sin or not? He thought for a while and he said, if the barn is old, you paint it. No, it's not vanity. You see that in the NIV it says meaningless, pointless, worthless, futile, absurd, vain vanity, based on Vanitas Latin from Jerome, the doctor of the church, okay, who worked on the Vulgate, the official translation of the Roman Catholic Church. However, scholars, when they have studied in depth, when they did word study and studied this word, this is actually what the etymology, the origin of the word is. Breath. Here it is. Remember wind a few days ago? How do you like wind? I say it can be cold, but I don't like wind. Breath, vapor, is something temporary, fleeting, short-lived. This is something that maybe today's generation would understand. Fleeting is already a word that's not as used as frequently, but short-lived. Coming in parallelism with chasing after the wind, quickly passing. And if you would like something to, a picture to come to your mind right away, it is Abel. Okay, the second son of Adam and Eve. His life was short. So in Hebrew, Havel is the same root, Havel, which means short-lived. So the major frustration of the author is not that life has no meaning, but that whatever is good in life is short-lived. So what are the prominent topics in the book? Okay. The author, we said, is Solomon. Not everybody will agree with that. If everybody agreed, there would be a few books written on Ecclesiastes, but this way there are many books. It's a whole industry. So not everybody agrees on everything. The traditional authorship is very useful. Well, let me ask you a question. If you lived in ancient Israel and somebody talked to you and said, hey, young man, hey, young woman, have you ever tried to find meaning in life, purpose for living in enormous riches? I can tell you a story. I had more money than anybody else on earth in my time. And I was the wisest person and so on. You will scratch your eyes a little and you will say, aren't you King Solomon? Yeah, definitely that type of person would be a good illustration of what is found in the book. So if it was Solomon, he searched for life's meaning, and his budget for search was in trillions of dollars. Well, I wouldn't even try it, right? But he could afford to do that. Then you probably remember the catalog of times or the catalog of polarities. There is a time for this, and there is a time for that, isn't it? There is a time to aspire and work hard, and there is a time to celebrate. There is a time for war, there is a time for peace. Next one, in pursuit of permanent happiness. Wow, that comes very close to something we know well of, isn't it? So, long before the United States of America was established, there was someone who wanted not only pursuit of happiness, but permanent happiness. Even more difficult, isn't it? And of course, the author keeps reminding us, life is not fair, right? There is a beautiful poem on youth and old age. Interestingly enough, At the end of the book of Proverbs, there is a poem about that virtuous woman. We call her Supermom. Gets up at, it's intimidating, I better not talk about it, but getting up at 4:15 in the morning, doing basically everything. And instead of husband working on her reputation, he can work like this in the town. Look at that lucky man. He's married to the superwoman. Thanks to her, everybody knows him and admires him because of the wife. I hear all kinds of statements about treatment of women in the Bible. Yeah, there was misuse a lot, but there's the other side too. That's for another topic. Okay, and then of course we all remember, okay, the closing words. Remember the Creator. The day will come, you will walk out of this church, kind of Sabbath noonish, isn't it? And you go out and say, I remember around this church in the trees, there were birds and they were singing. And somebody tells you they are still doing it. They are still singing, but we can no longer hear that. Oh, I remember when I walked out of the church, there was greenery around, beautiful blue sky. Now it's all becoming gray. It still is, but you cannot enjoy the way, or we cannot enjoy the way we used to. So there is a very, very nice poem at the end. So both, let's remember, the book of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, they finish in a similar way. Okay, remember the Creator. So some of the passages. Since everything is short-lived in life, since all go to the same place, men, women, good men, good women, bad men, bad women, all go to the same place. Since everything that I have worked hard for, somebody may spend in a week after I'm gone. What do I do with life? How shall we then live, to borrow the New Testament language? Okay, this is what a teacher says. I know that there is nothing better for men and women than to be happy and to do good while they live. This is good. I like this. Each of them may eat and drink, non-alcoholic, of course, and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. So, there are good things around us, but let's not look for the meaning and purpose of life in those toys, because they are borrowed for a while, as the song says. We need to approach good things in life as gifts from the Creator God and enjoy them while we can. That's why Dr. Williams said this is the most honest book in the Bible, and one can approach it that way. So, two contrasting perspectives. Time and again, the book talks about life, and the phrase that repeatedly comes like a refrain is under the sun. So, what is life under the sun? Everything is quickly passing, isn't it? Especially when you look back. It was like yesterday. God is real but distant. I wish I could figure out God's mind. Well, I can in the most important things that I need, but I would like to learn more. And sometimes I need to be stopped like Daniel and told, Daniel, take it easy, man. You need a little rest. Go and rest, and the day will come when you will receive your reward. God is real but distant. Who has figured the mind of God? Pursuits of wealth, pleasure, and knowledge have no lasting value. And now we could spend an hour in getting some ideas. How are we remembered once we have gone? It's a big topic. The big topic. As you travel around the world and you see that people build, I'm almost tempted to say, monumental structures, so that for many years after they are gone, someone will come and say, oh, this name is not familiar, but somebody was surely wealthy. And that's it. There is one phrase, you don't see quotations around it. Beyond the sun. I made it up. Do you mind? There are songs like that, far beyond the sun. Have you heard of that song? Translated from Spanish? Mas allá del sol. Yes, we sing that when we travel. Beyond the sun. Everything is important in its time. That's why it's not useful to say that the teaching of Ecclesiastes is life makes no sense. No, because everything can make sense and be enjoyed in its time, in its proper time. But this is beyond the sun. Who is beyond the sun? God. After all, the owner of the universe. Isn't it? Who am I? Handful of dirt shaped in the likeness of the King of the universe. That's who I am. But there he is, beyond the sun. And because of him, everything changes here under the sun. Everything is important in its time. So what should I do? Enjoy family, friends, foods. Look, this is alliterative. So F, F, F. It's easy to remember. Enjoy family, enjoy friends, enjoy foods, and your work too. I looked for another F, couldn't find that one, but and work as blessings from God. All these are given by God as gifts to be enjoyed, once again, in its time, in their proper time. So I tried to summarize an article from here. Devotion on the Hebrew Bible. So here is interesting that different scholars who teach Hebrew and the original language of the Bible, so they went through some passages that are interesting. And when you know the original language, you say, oh, really? I never read that verse in that way. So it's very useful. So let's pass it around. Since everything under the sun is temporary, fleeting, and soon flies away, we should enjoy what we have and what we can do and enjoy them now. I can tell you when we discuss a little about this in the class, lessons on living, biblical perspectives, quite a few of our students may not be practicing Christians and so on. And I say, this is my problem. Some of them, few months into the class, they said, hey, this class saved my marriage. My husband was surprised. I took time to look straight into his eyes, and I said, you were so handsome, and that may not be forever. So let's be happy now. And then they also read a book about conflict resolution by David Oxberger. Okay? What's the title of that book? Caring Enough to Confront. But the name is Care Fronting. Care Fronting. You confront because you care. And you confront in order to care. Because you clearly you confront too. All right. Passing away as surely as we will die. Oh, I skipped also. Because of all those things, because all of those things will end with us, passing away as surely as we will die. Life is a fleeting thing that needs to be enjoyed. That's a gift from God. So that's what the teacher is saying. And then the teacher stopped. How do you picture Solomon gathering groups of people, preferably younger ones, and saying, I can never forget my mom. She loved me so much that in some moments of intimacy, she shared with me stories that children should never hear from their parents. How she got married to my dad. Quite a story. Every time when we are in Amman, Jordan, I go a little to the old city. Remember Uriah the Hittite. So then Solomon became strong and wise, and then he was led astray, began worshiping other gods. And that led him to despair. And he said, all that I had just so quickly passed away. What's going to happen next? And so on. So, any comments, any questions, please?
I see this as a man who viewed himself as the most powerful and wise man in the world at the time, the most wealth in the world, who looks at all of that and basically finally realizes that while he could have commanded anything to happen or bought whatever he wanted, he couldn't command time to stop, and he couldn't purchase more time. And so once he understood that, then contemplated it, then he turned to the only place you can turn after that, and that is that life is a series of present moments. The future may not happen; the past is already done, and you need to make the most of those present moments, and that's the only way it can be done.
So nicely said. Thank you. I hope everybody has heard it well. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Also reminds me of Psalms 90, with Psalms of the writing of Moses, is that teach us a number of days, things like talks about we are going to live 70 days, 70 years, and even maybe 80. But then our days passed away so quickly before we know it, we're gone. And then we also say that just number of it.
So that we can gain a heart of wisdom. Thank you for pointing to that. Any other comments or questions? Please.
I think part of what's being revealed here is what is important while we're alive, while we have the privilege, are the relationships we build. Family, fellow workers, neighbors, even people that we may not like or agree with. The relationship and the relationship with God.
The importance of relationships. Thank you. With God and with the fellow human beings. Any other comments or questions? How many of you can say, in a moment, how many of you can say, I'm tempted to proclaim Ecclesiastes to be at least one of my favorite books in the Bible. So I have done a poor work. I need to come back. Maybe I will try Jonah. Huh?
I read through this last night, and one thing that struck me, and maybe it's because of my season of life and those around me, but 11 verse 5, and he says, just as you cannot understand the path of the wind or the mystery of a tiny baby growing in its mother's womb, so you cannot understand the activity of God who does all things.
So that comes very close to John chapter 3, when Jesus talked to Nicodemus. Isn't it? Wind blows wherever it wants, and so does God's Spirit. And that's why it's easier to handle the doctrine than the Spirit. Okay, I shouldn't have said that. But I just wanted to say, in case you came a little later, one of the next, what do we call it, group of biblical books that we'll be studying will be the Minor Prophets. So there is a gift here for you from the leaders of Grace and Truth. And if you know of someone, Kelly, no, Jenna's with somebody else's property. But if you know of someone who is not here today, but who would appreciate and so on, you can they take an extra copy for that person? One per family and so on. So the books are here, don't leave before this. One more comment, maybe we have time for one more comment. Please.
Get a sense in Ecclesiastes that the writer is unhappy. You get a sense that he's very unhappy. Repeat the question.
Can we get a sense in reading the book of Ecclesiastes that the author was not, let me paraphrase it, bursting with happiness like Song of Songs
You get a sense that there's something missing in his life
from the beginning?
from the beginning.
Why would someone
You know,
that way?
and there is a Jewish author that writes a book. It's titled "Everything I Ever Wanted. I'm Still Not Happy." And you get the sense that this writer resents passing on what he has acquired to the people behind him or in front of him. And so in my own mind, I'm thinking to myself, right, that there is a quote that happiness, true happiness, right, that God says in a way that I created you with an emptiness that only I can fill.
Hmm.
And until that is filled with that space that he creates in you specific for himself, you'll never be happy. You'll never be truly happy.
We use the word wholeness, completeness, isn't it? There was a Greek philosopher who, you want to say more?
You know, I can follow that with another quote that says,
Mhm.
the only one who can truly satisfy the human heart is the one that made it. And so I think he goes back. Solomon alludes to it in a sense when he said, remember now your creator, days of your youth. In other words, he points back to the creator. He keeps reflecting, but in a way, you get that he's a little bit unhappy. And I think that maybe because he got distracted by the wives he married, maybe because he did stray.
He definitely was sorry about the past. Remember Tchaikovsky, the Russian composer? He liked to say, I'm sad or I regret my past. I am not happy with the present. I hope in the future, for example. Okay, so that's what Tchaikovsky said. Now, a Greek philosopher had a younger friend, and he advised him, by all means, marry. If you find a good wife, you will be happy. If you don't, you will become a philosopher. And it's good for every man to be a philosopher. Now, not all of you heard the closing statement, and it's good for every man to be a philosopher. Okay, I have a story, a Jewish story to finish, but before that, we have one more comment, please.
The Sabbath school lesson this week in the quarterly talks about two great commandments: love to God and love to fellow men. But it seems to me that Solomon focused so much on himself, trying to earn happiness for himself, so that when his son took over the kingdom, when Solomon passed, one of the problems or one of the complaints was, can you lower the taxes that your father imposed on us? So it seemed as though there was so much, into happiness for himself. I don't see any record of him helping the poor and the needy. I don't know if you did.
No. So Rehoboam was like that, and he did to the kingdom of David and Solomon the worst that could happen. The kingdom split. So focusing too much on just our wants and so on, unfortunately, was reflected in more than one event in the family. So to close the story, I have probably told you this story already once, so I'm going to do it the short way. All right? And it is the story. I wanted to insert the slide, but it was too late. I had already sent to you. Okay, so it is the story about a young Jewish American man. He was in college, and he was a very diligent student. So on the graduation day, his parents gave him a congratulations card on his graduation and a ticket to travel in Europe. And that was very significant to him because one of the destinations on the ticket was Warsaw, Poland. Okay, Warsaw, Poland. And the student was ecstatic, not excited, ecstatic, because during his high school and college, he read basically everything that Rabbi Hafetz Chaim had written, articles, books, and so on. So now he said, I'm going to meet that man. I cannot believe that. So fast forward, knocking on the door in Warsaw, Poland. He had the address, everything. After he knocked on the door, an elderly man came out smiling. He said, welcome, hi. And the young man began stuttering. Rabbi, I'm a student from the United States. I've read everything that you have written. I cannot believe that I'm talking to you. I would like just a little time. You have just a little time for me. I would like to sit down and ask you a few questions. And the rabbi was very generous and said, oh, please, by all means, I have all the time that you need. He opened the door, come in. The student stepped in. You remember the story I told you already before? And the student was shocked and speechless. He looked around. What did he see? A small desk with a wooden chair. What else? Simple bed, one sink. Maybe that was it. I believe a place where you can hang your clothes and many books. The students didn't know what to say. And the rabbi said, is there something wrong, young man? And said, no, Rabbi, but what is your furniture? My furniture? Yeah, what is your furniture? Because you live here. And when the best way Rabbi answers a question is by asking a question. So somebody asked the Jewish rabbi, why do you answer questions by asking questions? And he said, what's wrong with that? Okay, that's another story. So the rabbi said, so you wonder where my furniture is? Yeah, Rabbi, where is your furniture? Where is yours? And the young man said, my furniture? Rabbi, I'm here for a few days. I'm just visitor. I said, so am I. So am I. So it's the Holy Spirit that we cannot control, moving in this place that somebody would like to say, Lord, thank you for an interesting aspect of the gospel found in the book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament. Some people avoid reading altogether. So somebody who would like just to talk to the Lord at the end of this, and then we can miss. My wife and I have free afternoon. If you would like, we can stay. So who wants to say a few words to the Lord? Have you been touched by the message? Is it worth studying? Have we learned something? Are we closer to God and to our Savior? You would like to offer a prayer? Let's pray.
Father in heaven, we're so eternally grateful, first, Lord, because we can come together as a group, as a family, and to read your word. We thank you that you brought us a teacher that could explain some of the things that may seem a quandary to some, and we sit and learn. Thank you as we go our separate ways. Bring us back next week where we will have a joyful reunion with food. We pray these things in your name.
Amen.
Amen. Have a nice rest of the Sabbath day.
How are you doing?